Have you ever really stopped to think about how we see the world? I mean, we're constantly naming things, right? Putting them in little boxes. That's a chair, that's a tree, that's me, that's you. It feels totally normal, even necessary. But what if I told you that this constant labeling isn't just describing reality? What if it's actually creating a flatter, less alive version of it? In this explainer, we're going to go beyond the label and deconstruct how the words we use quite literally shape our world, from everyday objects all the way to our very sense of self. Wow, this quote from Eckhart Tolle just gets right to the point, doesn't it? The idea is so simple, but so deep. When you quickly slap a label on something, you see a bird, your brain says bird, and you look away. You stop actually seeing it. You've swapped the living, breathing, mysterious creature for a simple, boring mental file. So the more we do this, the more we're trading this incredibly rich experience of reality for a handful of shallow descriptions. And that makes you wonder, what's the real cost of doing that all the time? Okay, but wait a minute. You're probably thinking, hold on, how else are we supposed to make sense of anything? And you're right. Language, labels, definitions, these are the tools we use to get by, to talk to each other, to build everything we know. So is there a way to use these tools without getting trapped by them? That's the big question. Let's dig in. All right, so let's start with the absolute basics, the fundamental building block of this whole thing, the label itself. In this first part, we're going to break down the crucial difference between a word and the actual thing it's pointing to. It's all about separating the symbol from the reality. So this philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, he had a really cool idea about this. He called it language games. He said that language isn't one giant, rigid thing. It's more like a collection of different games, and each game has its own rules. A word's meaning totally depends on which game you're playing. Think about the word fire. If you say it to a friend when you're telling a joke, it means one thing. If you shout fire in a crowded theater, yeah, it means something completely different. Same word, different game, totally different reality. And this brings us to the core metaphor for this entire explainer. The map is not the territory. A label, a word, it's just a tool. It's a pointer. It's a map. Think about it, right? A map of your city is super useful for getting around, but you would never, ever mistake that piece of paper for the actual city. The noise, the smells, the people, the life. Well, words are exactly the same. They're useful guides, for sure, but they are not the place itself. And here it is, put as simply as it gets from Milton Dawes. We forget this all the time, but we are the ones who give words their meaning. The word tree has zero power by itself. It's just a sound. We assign it to this concept in our heads, but that concept is just a ghost, a pale imitation of the actual, living, breathing thing out there in the world. So if our words are just maps, what happens when we forget that? What's the big deal? Well, in this next section, we're going to explore exactly that, the consequences of mistaking the map for the territory. And you'll see how this one simple mistake basically builds the entire world we think we're living in. Just look at how slippery our labels are. We call something a door and something else a window, but what they are completely changes with context. To your cat, they're both just holes to get through. A one-way mirror is a window to the person watching, but a mirror to the person being watched. Or take the word gate. What is a gate? Is it an access point? A control point? A barrier? A shift from one kind of space to another? The truth is, it's all of those and none of them. The meaning isn't in the object, it's in how we relate to it. So this raises the critical question, right? What's the real danger? What happens when we completely forget that our labels are just these flexible, flimsy maps, and we start treating them like they are the solid, unchangeable real world? And that brings us to the most powerful, the most fundamental, and maybe the most convincing and misleading label of them all, the one we apply to ourselves. It's time to turn this whole idea inward and take a hard look at the concept we call I. From this viewpoint, the label I is the ultimate example of mistaking the map for the territory. The idea is there's just one single undivided field of awareness. That's the territory. But what we do is we take a mental marker, draw a little circle around a tiny piece of it, and call it me. The problem is the second you create a me, you automatically create a not me, which is literally everything else in the universe. And that line, that boundary, is where the whole feeling of separation and conflict gets started. And why is this separation called the root of suffering? Well, once you've created a me that feels separate from everything else, that me starts wanting things from the not me world. That's attachment. And it starts trying to push other things away. That's aversion. This constant game of wanting and not wanting, of pushing and pulling, this feeling of being just one tiny, fragile fragment in a huge, overwhelming world, it's a nonstop source of stress and anxiety. And here's the real kicker, the paradox of it all. The thinking mind, the very part of us that creates the label I, then tries to turn around and understand the awareness it came from. But it can't. It's impossible. The metaphors used to describe this are just perfect. It's like a puppet trying to figure out the puppeteer. It's like a shadow trying to grab the body that's casting it. The tool just can't grasp the hand that's holding it. So from this one primary illusion, the separate self, everything else gets split in two. Up and down, light and dark, good and bad, right and wrong. So let's zoom out a little and see how this one whole undivided reality shows up to us as this constant dance of opposites. You've all seen the yin and yang symbol, right? It is the perfect map for this idea. It shows how a single, complete whole, the circle, is made of two dynamic flowing parts. Now, the most important thing to get is that they are not enemies. Light doesn't fight darkness. They define each other. Night becomes day, which becomes night again. They're not opponents. They're dance partners. You simply can't have one without the other. And this isn't just some Eastern idea. What's absolutely fascinating is when you look at ancient wisdom from around the world. Check out this table. It shows how ancient Western Hermetic philosophy and Eastern Taoism, thousands of miles and years apart, landed on the exact same conclusions, that things we call opposites, like hot and cold, are just different degrees of the same thing. And if you push anything to its absolute extreme, it flips into its opposite. It's like a universal human insight into how reality works. So what happens when you truly, deeply grasp this? Your entire world can shift. It stops looking like a battlefield of opposing forces and starts to look more like a cooperative dance. Conflict begins to just dissolve into harmony once you finally see the underlying unity that connects everything. Okay, for our final section, we're going big. We're taking this idea to its ultimate conclusion. We're going to zoom out past the self, past duality, to the very fabric of existence itself. And this is the point where our words, our maps, our labels, they really start to fall apart. Now, this simple diagram is pointing to a truly mind-bending idea. It suggests that underneath everything is a fundamental, non-local consciousness, something that exists outside of our normal ideas of space and time. In this model, this consciousness looks at a whole sea of pure possibility, what quantum physicists might call wave functions, and by the very act of observing, it collapses them into the solid physical world we experience. So in this view, consciousness isn't just something in the universe, it's the very thing that brings the universe to life. And let's be really clear here. When we say universal consciousness, we are not talking about some big guy in the sky thinking thoughts. It's described more as the fundamental potential for awareness itself, the raw fabric of being. Our own individual awareness, that little sense of I we've been talking about, is seen as just a temporary, localized ripple in this vast, universal ocean of consciousness. It's all the same water. So, as you might imagine, when we try to think about these ultimate ideas, a consciousness before time, a reality without opposites, we just hit a wall. Our maps aren't big enough for this territory. As the source material says, as we get closer to this reality, our language just fails. We become wholly voiceless, because words were built for a world of separate things, not an indescribable, unified whole. And this brings us right back full circle to our philosopher, Wittgenstein. This was his famous final conclusion. After all his work, figuring out the absolute limits of language, he basically said that the most important part of his work was everything he didn't write, the things he was silent about. The most profound truths, he suggested, can't be said, they can only be shown or experienced. Okay, so that was a lot of talk, a lot of maps. How about we try to experience the territory, just for a moment? I invite you to try this with me. Wherever you are, just for a second, close your eyes. Now, bring all of your focus to the physical sensations in your hands. Can you feel a kind of buzzing, a warmth, a pressure, an energy? Now, here's the trick. Try to drop the labels. Don't think tingling or warm. Just experience the raw sensation itself, directly. That's a small taste of the territory. So we're going to end not with an answer, but with a final question for you to carry with you. Imagine two different paths in life. The first path is a life spent constantly chasing everything you've labeled as good and running away from everything you've labeled as bad, a constant, exhausting struggle. Now imagine a second path,
A life spent simply welcoming everything that comes without judgment, accepting reality just as it is. Which of those two paths sounds more like peace to you? The answer isn't a new label, it's an experience.